How did you initially come across the introduction to psilocybin? And as a two-part question, when you were introduced, was it an immediate acceptance, or did it take some time to say, okay, I'm going to give that a go?
Well, it was an accident. So I was in Cambodia and at the peak of my alcoholism, knocking on death's door, literally, turning yellow. And I rented a villa and we're having a party. And we're all getting together and we're all going to party. And somebody brought some along and I thought, well, I'll do this to party. And then it wasn't a party. It was a rip out of your body. It's time to face the music of your own karma and really evaluate yourself, look at yourself, not in a negative way. The trip wasn't in any way negative. It was very, very powerful because it was a very high dose. It wasn't negative. It was very cathartic. And as many of these trips are, there's a lot of crying involved, there's a lot of release of emotion, pent up emotion. When you go deep into addiction, it's not because you're wrong in any way or you're doing something wrong. It's part of your path. Everybody's on the path. There's nobody that's not on the path. You can't not be on the path, even if you're deeply addicted, you're an alcoholic, whatever. It's often a product of unresolved issues deep within the subconscious that you can't access. And what I come to find out is the second part of your question is my initial experience with it made so much sense because of my psychology degree. I'd studied therapy. I'd studied how the mind works for years. And so Jung made a lot of sense to me. If you read Jung managed to achieve his insight on the nature of the self and who we really are, who you really are, who I really am, without any entheogens at all. So it was when I mixed entheogens with Jung, that was a powerful combination where I thought this is unbelievably life-changing for me and for everybody else. I mean, the data is out there. You know, the meta-analysis of people that were addicted and have taken psilocybin or LSD at a high dose, it's got like an 80% success rate in curing addiction. It doesn't cure addiction by saying, hey, you stop drinking, you're an arsehole. It stops drinking because the reason that you drink is from the unresolved trauma. So you're healing the underlying trauma, and then you don't need the drink anymore. Drinking is just like meditation. Meditation is the cessation of thinking. So what do you do when you drink? Cessation of thinking. It's like cheap and quick meditation. So the alcoholic's pursuit is a spiritual journey. It's a pursuit of mental extrication from their predicament, and their mental environment, which is very much predicated on their childhood. Mm-hmm. So it's what happened to me as a child or what trauma did I undergo in the majority of cases, not in all cases. Nothing I say applies to everybody. But and then the psychedelic is the key that opens the door to resolve the trauma if you're successful with it under the correct conditions. And so once I saw what it was, that it wasn't a drug, then I pursued it. And you start with Terence McKenna, Aldous Huxley, Albert Hoffman, right?
Yep.
And you find out, whoa, there's a whole load of people talking about this. Ram Dass, for instance, Richard Alpert, who wrote The Psychedelic Experience with Timothy Leary. Ram Dass, Richard Alpert, was a psychologist. So, and he had already a background in the pursuit of to know oneself. That's what psychology is. It's the study, psych is mind, ology is the study of the mind. And what is but the mind? It's all mind. So it's the study of yourself. And I think people that are drawn to study psychology, to learn about serial killers, to learn about themselves and who they are, I think they have got a predisposition to working with entheogens, because the revelation that happens with them is extraordinary. If you already have a theological basis, it's extraordinary. And to find other people like these guys that have been saying this for years, long before I accidentally discovered it, is very comforting at a time where you go through, there's a lot of grief in death through psychedelics, because death is a psychological phenomenon. You come to find it's only a psychological phenomenon because all matter exists. First law of thermodynamics, energy can't be created or destroyed. All matter exists indefinitely. The energy exists. But the psychological construct that you call I, that's what dies. And so death is only ever a psychological phenomenon.
This person, let's say Ryan, the alcoholic from the past, does he die or transform?
Dies. I mean, it's subjective what you mean by each one. Because of course, like the fundamental psychology still exists. And although with entheogens, you can have that peak where you undergo the death rebirth, but you're coming back into Ryan. So it is a transformation process, but I've seen the process for me has been a process of iterated death and rebirth, because what's reborn after the alcoholic Ryan is the spiritual Ryan. But the spiritual Ryan is just as much an illusion as the alcoholic Ryan was, because one says, okay, I've undergone the death and rebirth experience the first time, which I didn't know you could even do. So I realized the illusion of who I thought I was. So now who am I? Well, I must be some really spiritual guru, right? I am enlightened. And that's just more bullshit. And that's why I called the channel The Naked Guru, because the realization after the next death and rebirth is that you're not that either. And that continues on an iterative process until, I guess, it's into nobodiness. And it's not good to go into nobodiness when you're on YouTube, because they call it YouTube, YouTube and Facebook. These are all egotistical constructs. They're expansions of the ego in many ways. It's like your personality is fired out to, in my case, hundreds of thousands of people who then get to judge you,
If you enjoyed this content, we're doing 5 clips like this a week. If you want to watch the full podcast, click here.